For one of the articles that you read in your matrix, and it should be one of the 8 research studies, you are going to do an in-depth article review for that particular article. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how to make this assignment come to life. And for this, I'm going to use one of the examples that I gave you, which is Stacy Hart's paper. Stacy's a high school math teacher, and she was a student last summer and really wanted to investigate some patterns of behavior she saw around gender in her math class. So this was one of a quantitative article that she read, and this was her article review. I've given you some basic guidelines for these, and keep in mind that they are limited to 1,500 words, and that is to force you to be concise. And they are both to give the reader a quick overview of the topic, the article, the methods, and then really the goal is for you to do some analysis around, was it a well done study and what parts were well done, and so I'll walk you through that. So one thing to notice is that Stacy's first paragraph here really brings the reader quickly into the topic. It doesn't assume that the person knows what she's talking about. So it doesn't start with this standardized test. It starts with which test is she talking about, and then focuses it really into, what do we need to know briefly about background knowledge in order to understand the study. She makes her first mention of the author's work in this paragraph, and then she goes into much more detail here about what did they do and how did they do it. So what I recommend for you is, as you read your study, do your annotation version of the review first, and then you're going to flush that out. One thing to note, though, is if you look at her work, there's very few direct quotes from the article itself, with the exception of things like the hypothesis. Okay, this really is meant to be your retelling of the article. Who are the participants? What was it investigating? Then she moves quickly into how did they do the analysis of the data. And in this case, it was statistical and some inferential statistics around performance. She gives a brief overview of that. And then she goes into what did they conclude, what did they find, and how did that relate to, in this case with a quantitative study, their hypothesis. She then moves into what was the strength of this study, or in other of the article review samples, sometimes folks move into what were weaknesses in the study and connecting that to the Creswell text, basically kind of using him as a sounding board for where would Creswell say this was well done, or where would they say this is not well done. And then there's some conclusion, and then really the other piece is in the final part is the so what. What does this matter? And again, here she's not speaking specifically about herself. She never uses the word I, but you can see how she's going to translate this into her own study by making sense of it as a teacher. So down at the bottom, then you'll have your Creswell and also your source again, to just start to work on how do you create a reference list. So hopefully that helps to give you some context. What we'll do is we'll break this assignment into 2 parts. You'll do a rough draft, and then we will do some peer review of those, and then you'll do a final draft, and to help with sort of practicing both the writing style and also evaluating research studies.